If your younger self took a look at who you turned out to be in this day and age, would they classify you as a hero or a villain? As juvenile as superhero stories may seem to some people, I always grew up believing that the messages and the lessons that were taught through superhero stories have always been such a defining factor of how we develop. Even if you weren't super interested in like a DC or Marvel superhero, we always had westerns that told stories about heroes that came in and saved the town, or we had old movies and stories about the old Greek gods and the culture there, where these guys were coming in and taking on powerful beings to save the world. But no matter how you were introduced to the idea of a hero, there is always messages that were put across about good and evil, which ultimately I feel like shapes society today. But if you haven't found out already, the classification of good and evil and the principles behind them do differ based on a person's perspective, which I find pretty interesting. So, today in the Free Think Dojo, I wanted to talk about how hero stories and the idea of heroes and villains has pretty much structured how we view good and evil and how that can differ person by person. Now, obviously, this type of conversation that can be very philosophical or very complex can be derailed very quickly. So, with today's video as well, I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible, and I'm open to any questions in the comments because it can get a little complicated. As far as I can remember growing up, I was always into Marvel, DC superheroes, and was always really influenced by how they acted and kind of just how cool they were. They were also my first exposure to the ideas of morality and good and bad in the world. And I always found it so interesting that as kids, even though we're so simple minded when we're young, we always gravitate automatically towards the good guy in the stories. I remember growing up watching a lot of the old Batman movies, the animated ones, and then also when the live action ones started coming out in the early 2000s. And I remember getting so excited and felt so much pride seeing Batman go up against a villain and totally demolish him and just, put him in jail or whatever he might have done. And it always felt like I was also the hero watching these movies. I then realized that I was becoming so shaped by these movies that I was watching and, wanted to put on a persona in real life of trying to help a lot of people, try to be that real life hero to some that really needed it. Around that time as well, I started getting into martial arts, learning how to defend myself and the ones that were around me. And I also wanted to really push to be a helping hand to individuals around me as well. But eventually, I ran into a pretty harsh reality. Good deeds in helping people will not always lead to good outcomes. There were times where I was really trying to help others and doing the best I could, and sometimes it was overbearing. Sometimes what I was trying to do might have been too much for the person I was trying to help. It might have been the wrong solution that I felt like they needed, but they didn't feel like they needed. It can get kind of complicated in that way. I also had self esteem issues of if this nice guy persona was all fake and I was just doing it to, get attention or, say that I was a good person when I might have not been. And it started to kind of mess me up. I started to second guess myself and if my intentions were actually true. But I feel like that was all just because I was self conscious and I had good intentions to obviously help them, but I was too afraid of how they were viewing me at the same time. But that self confidence issue started to kind of get taken over by another issue, which was being taken advantage of. Some people out there will find it their mission, I guess, to kind of take advantage of your good deeds and your good guy persona. They will literally try to suck you dry of everything you can give them until you have nothing left. So then this whole superhero hero sacrifice type message started to flood into my head of I have to give everything that I can to help somebody, so it's worth the risk. But then I started to think, who saves the hero when they need help? But I started to realize that some, but not all, of these people that I helped were not there to back me up when I also needed help. Did you ever see The Joker when it came out? The Joaquin Phoenix movie that told a different style of origin story for one of the most popular villains in DC Comics, the Joker. For a kid that grew up with heroes being the good guys and villains being the bad guy, this movie really put me in a weird place. It seemed like it came out at the right time when I was starting to feel these things, such as being the good guy, not getting anything in return, people not coming to help me when I needed it, and it really started to kind of change my perspective on things. Obviously, the movie was a huge take on mental health in today's society, but it was also about a villain that we all grew up hating and seeing as the bad guy being portrayed as just someone that's been broken and society gave up on. It was the first time that I actually felt bad for a villain. Most of these villains are just broken people that had issues that they couldn't overcome, so they took matters into their own hands. But how's that so different from a hero? You know what I mean? Obviously, it does come down to what next steps they take. Obviously, the path that they decide to go on after all these struggles that they experienced. Are they going to want to help people live better lives, or are they going to go around killing people to quote unquote save the city? The hero believes what they're doing is actually good in a moral sense, but at the same time, the villain can also argue that what they're doing is also good in a moral sense. Society definitely does have their line that they've drawn, though, between good and bad, and whether we like to admit it or not, most of us do try and follow that line as best we can. But I think a very important message is obviously not to support villains and the bad things that they do, but to understand why they do what they do. I truly believe that the good guy persona that I grew up learning about from these heroes is a good path to take. We all want to help people get better. We want to help them in times of need or when they feel unsafe. But all in all, I think it's one of those things that we have to remember that we are also human. And we don't want to break ourselves to help someone else because what's going to stop us from becoming a villain after that? As we all know and may have experienced in our life, if you give all that you have trying to be a good person and you end up breaking, obviously, if no one's there to come save you and you don't have support, what's going to stop you from going down a bad road? So I think overall, it's important to understand the path of a hero and a villain, the path of a good and evil person, because whether you want to be evil or good is not really up to me to decide, but at least you'll know the difference between the two. And if you want to have a balance, I think that's really the best way to go. You want to be a good person, you want to help people, but people will say that it's evil to not help someone. They'll say that it's a bad thing to give up on somebody who doesn't want your help. And at the end of the day, that's honestly up for you to decide. But if it means you're going to have to sacrifice yourself, is it really worth it? I'll let you decide. I hope this video wasn't too confusing. I hope it's something that everybody kind of understands in their own way. Obviously, it's a very philosophical topic, but it has been something that I've always thought about and wanted to share with the community. I am really curious to hear everybody else's opinions, though. Comment down below what you think about good and evil and kind of your perspective on it. Also, what you think about heroes and villains and what you would describe yourself as these days. I promise I won't judge if you're a villain. I promise. Appreciate everybody stopping by the Free Think Dojo again today. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for more content. Like the video. Obviously, comment down below any ideas you have for topics for future videos. And I will talk to you guys later.